Special meeting of the Huron City Schools Board of Education. In session, Mr. Julier.
Mr. Jones. Here. Mrs. Green.
Here.
Mrs. Mass.
Here.
Mr. Slocum. Here. Mr. Ward.
Here.
Oh, sorry. There.
Flags back there.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Julier.
Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. At this time, I think we want to go to the gym.
Yeah, that was part of the main part of having the meeting here was to go down and look at our improvements in the gym, the cafeteria, and the hallway on the way down to some of the summer projects and other things. That, of course, we had the anonymous donor for the gym, and the girls are down there practicing volleyball. Just so everybody knows, we just told them, go ahead, practice as usual. Or us, we'll walk around and dodge balls if we have to. We can go do that now if you want.
Shall we?
Yeah, Julie. What's going on?
I can step over it.
Oh, I'm quite sure you could. No indictment of your athleticism.
Florida. Nice to be. There you go.
I don't think there's any other sport that he can try because it's time home.
Now, it says his battery's running low.
Well, he's new at this technology thing.
I like this one.
He's, John, come on.
You sure it's gonna be her?
Um,
Outstanding.
It's great, doesn't it?
Very impressed. The first thought I had was, how did we ask these student athletes to play under the previous conditions for so long?
It was
I
real
know.
rough, real rough.
The brightness is wonderful.
I have to
Absolutely.
say, since my time here, it's an unbelievable improvement in the gym and the cafeteria.
The good thing, that lighting, we really want to do it for the whole district. We replaced all these tubes with that LED lighting. We probably save about $25,000 a year easily in electricity.
Hmm.
So we're looking, there's a way to finance a project like that. And what we've got, we didn't pull the string last year because of COVID,
Mhm.
and it's really got to get serious. Maybe we can bundle other things with it, but
It's almost immediate return on
it's
investment.
a return. And the cool thing is, with these, they could probably do the high school in a week. And the special needs rooms and stuff, instead of replacing like kind of tubes, you could put in flat panels that allow mood lighting. You could change the color of the lighting and that kind of, and for just a little bit of an upcharge. So the technology is really, really good. And fact is, we don't have to inventory all these bulbs, so there's even savings on top of that. So it's a project that's sitting there. We just haven't been able to pull the trigger on it yet.
Good job to all of those involved. Mrs. Zilski, I know we talked, I'm sure, several vendors and so we're grateful for the effort. Mr. Treasurer, you as well, and Mr. Lamb.
Randy, do you know who the donor is? If we just had a generic kind of thank you with all of our signatures to send to the person?
I know who it is, and we've got that information, and
Okay,
we.
they don't want us to know, that's fine, but I would still like to thank them for,
Yeah, let
Such
me
a
not
generous-
neglect to acknowledge this
Mhm.
comes as a result of a significant donation.
And Mr. Muratori and I have done that through our normal process.
maybe at our board meeting, a card that we could sign while we're all there.
Good idea, Ms. Green. Well, the real reason we're here is to discuss the levy. Mr. Superintendent?
Well, I guess there's good news and bad news. So I'll start with the good news first. And just so everyone knows, I invited Will Folger here. I think everybody knows Will. He's got a long history. Will was my principal when I was hired as assistant in 2000. And he was the guy that I turned to when we decided and had been discussing the levy, because when he left here, as you all know, he went to Sheffield and they passed a levy over there. So good news is Will was willing to come in on July 12th and give Julie and myself a veritable encyclopedia of knowledge and structure in, putting together a citizens levy committee. And I'm just going to, and I asked Will to come here today because he can add more details or answer questions as well. I'm just going to kind of go through the general things that we talked about.
Let's say, John, can I set the stage just a little?
Please.
Okay, I just want to, because I remind folks where we stand, because levy's been filed, but I gave you this, and there's copies if the audience wants it, of potential cost reductions. And the reason I brought this up again, I got, not want to say chewed on, but Saturday night, some parents, I was at an event, and they go, levy doesn't pass, we want to know what the board's going to do. I said, well, we can't commit that right now, but what I want to emphasize here is we are in fiscal caution right now. Levy doesn't pass, we'll be in fiscal watch next year, and we'll be borrowing short term next school year. We'll still have cash at the end of the year, but we'll be borrowing during the year to make payroll. The following school year, we're in fiscal emergency. That's when the state will come in and say, you need to cut blah, blah, blah. So to stay out of fiscal emergency, you probably need to have at least $1 million to get balanced. You're looking at 2 million. To put that in perspective, $2 million is everything on the top of that list. Okay, so I just want to set that stage for you to say that it's as we talked about, you don't have to do anything, right? But if there's consequences if you don't, or we don't, I should say, and we still have an opportunity in May that it makes it, but still, if you go in May, you we'll put ourselves a year behind. And so you probably need at least $1 million. And if you look from that list, $1 million is painful. Okay, so I just want to set that up. It leads into the importance of Will's conversation with Mr. Rudd. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
And,
sorry about interrupting. I just
no,
want to
no,
make sure.
no, that's.
I kind of like the melodramatics of setting the stage.
Right. No, so, and, as we said, we know that we need a levy committee, citizens committee to do a levy. So, Will came in and he was extremely well prepared. Like I said, he had done these things before. And Will, please, if I get anything wrong, don't hesitate as always to tell me. But basically, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing, Will had said, felt like studying this thing that the goal would be around 2,000 yes votes. If we get that, we would pass. So we set a goal. And, the areas of attention that we talked about to get people out, obviously, to vote were, employees, parents, grandparents, alumni. So those are the, your focus areas and what you want to do. And I think the big thing that I learned, one of the many things that I learned is, Will had talked about when we do this thing, we need to form a lot of subcommittees, that makes up the whole. And we talked about things like you know, the central committee at the top, the donations committee, an analytics, demographics committee, transportation, an employee facilitator, alumni facilitator, people to talk about voter registration and get people registered, especially some of our alumni that might be at college. You know, social and traditional media people to help us out with someone to organize possible door-to-door campaigns. A speakers bureau, which Will pointed out, Paul and myself would be good because we're loudmouths. So he felt like we would fit into that well. Sign distribution, and again, analytics, because there's a lot of things that you break down that I had never thought of, that Will pointed out, you know, the precinct by precinct, almost road by road types of analytics. And of course, like we've talked about here, you know, and we discussed with Will, you know, our neighborhoods too, you know, campaigning by neighborhood, but that's still an analytic thing where you need committees. Then we put together a list of people that we thought, you know, we could approach that it could help us fill out the committee as a whole, and also co-chair some of these subcommittees or chair some of these subcommittees. So we had a bunch of people and names that we talked to, and some of the things that we're looking into is, you know, is our election history. That's important to know. Precinct maps, voter lists, who's registered. We're getting some alumni lists, you know, going to our coaches for fall sports rosters and things so we can see who's participating, student directory information, and then of course, you know, like we've done this morning, our positive things about what we're doing here with the schools, with the way the gyms look. And, you know, to me, with our community, just going down, and I'm glad that the volleyball team is in there practicing, you know, so it's even more impactful to me to see our kids using the nice facility that we just picked up as well. So we went over that. So we had a list of needs, and there's some other things, but I'm not going to go into detail. And so then at that point, you know, the idea is to go to work. Now this is, you know, kind of where the bad news begins to start is understandably, you know, one of Will's that he thought was crucial was a co-chair of the levy committee. Need two people. Will's, correct me if I'm wrong, Will's willing to do it if he has a co-chair, and but we're
Board of co-chair.
right.
Well, I would be willing to do a contingent upon community support.
Right, yes. And therein begins to have the problem is the co-chairs that we were reaching out to were we wanted to get so we had a good demographic balance, someone with kids in school. We, between the two of us, with the help of the building principals, I think we've reached out to 5, 6, maybe more, really, you know, people that meet the criteria. While they were supportive of our endeavor and thanked us for thinking of them and reminded me that they support the Huron schools, you know, to be blunt, because of the atmosphere right now and things going on, they just don't feel comfortable lending their name, being a co-chair. They don't feel good about doing this. So as I sit here and talk to you now, we do not have a co-chair. Like I said, I don't want to say, I guess you never exhaust your possibility, but we're pretty close to that. We're turning in the water. We have the plan. We know people that are willing to help us, but there is a feeling out there. You know, one person shared with me who I think they would have been excellent co-chairs. His wife is a teacher and a local graduate. He has a reasonably high profile job in Erie County. You know, they were afraid of having, you know, getting nailed in social media. So, but there is not, perhaps, I think I underestimate the mood of the community, if you will. We just can't get a lot of traction for kind of support you need for the levy. I don't know how these people would vote for the levy, but I'm talking about the the stuff you need for a viable levy, we're struggling.
What was the good news?
The good news was Will. Yeah, the good news is that with Will's, with that meeting, so this is something now, my notes are nothing great to look at, but trust me, within these 5 pages is a very good plan for a levy committee and to work and pass a levy. But it's akin to drawing up a very good play in football. If you don't have the people with the will to execute it, it doesn't matter how good the plan is. You got to work the plan. So that's where, and Will and I have had probably more conversations than he would have liked to have had. We probably talked more in the last 2 weeks than we did in 2 years. So, it's not like we're not communicating. We just, we're struggling.
Well, we are fortunate to have Will to the extent that we can. Will and I know each other well enough. He doesn't need me to sing his praises, but there's few people with his background, not only as a graduate, as administrator, as a father, as a administrator in other districts where they face this sort of problem. I'd be willing to say if there's another person better prepared and with that kind of experience in our entire town, I'd like to meet them because I can't think of who it would be. So you're right, that is good news.
Right. And the people that we reached out to, it's not like they didn't know Will. Some of them knew Will from the time they were children. They were in school and he was principal here. Their grandkids, his grandkids go to school with their kids. So it wasn't like we have a group of strangers. We just have a reluctant electorate.
Is there a possibility that we can pull the levy from the November ballot and not go on, not do this right now where we have such low community support and work on what needs to be worked on with our community?
I think anything is possible. I had, and I haven't seen Luann in 2 days because I was in Columbus Wednesday and we had the administrative briefing. To prepare for that question, I had Luann call the Board of Elections. I think they punted it to her to the state, so she's waiting and calling down there. I'm pretty sure, and Will might know. Now, keep in mind that, obviously, I guess everything's open for discussion where we're at now. If we discuss that and maybe if we even did that, we couldn't do that and keep the status quo. If we went that route, then, which I'm not opposed to, we're opening up all kinds of new doors and ways we have to look. We have to re-examine, I think, everything that we're doing. But I believe that is possible. Will, can you speak to that?
I can't speak directly. However, candidates withdraw. There's been many times when candidates withdrew once they've already filed. If a candidate can withdraw, I don't know why an issue could not be withdrawn, but I don't know.
Hasn't been printed yet.
Right. The
It's
ballot
interesting
has-
that the locals printed it. How are we responsible? They can handle that question. You said not to.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Scott.
Not important. Or is this-
Yeah, so-
Well, you mentioned to me that, most districts come back for new money on what kind of cycle, every 5-6 years, something like that.
Pardon me? What do you?
Yeah, I thought that when we were talking like last week that you said that a lot of school districts, because we haven't asked for new money since 2005. So that's 16 years ago, that most districts will come in, sooner than that and ask for new money. And all we've ever asked for is just renewals. So,
My experience has been you get two different thoughts here. One being you wait as long as you can, and you're good stewards of the money, which is what Huron's done. The average is about 5 to 7 years. The school goes back for additional money. You mentioned, 15 years or whatever. I was gone by then. There is the philosophy out there, you go back every 5 to 7 years. And in this case, for instance, instead of coming back with 5.6 and 15, you come back with a 2.5 and 5 to 7. That a lot of schools will do that. Every 5-7 years, they put something up. Randy's probably aware of some of them. And the problem with that, though, you're putting your estimates for money, and you don't really need it yet. Flip a coin. Which way are you going to go? It's probably what you're going to hear about is the way you don't go.
And, a lot of the criticism, I guess, when we've even broached this over the last few years, when Scott and I came in on January of 06, one of the first things that he and Joy and I decided as a group was that we were going to take $1 million off of our tax revenue every year and put that in, if you want to just call it our savings account, okay? So over the years, we accumulated quite a bit, and then you kind of hit that peak where your expenses, exceed your income, and then you have to start deficit spending. But still, when you're going to, the public and you're like, well, you've got like 5 million in savings. Why are you coming to us? You've got 6 million or whatever. But that just every year, more and more of it just chips away. So people just don't understand. And so now you get to the point where we're down to our last, couple million or whatever. We can only go another year or whatever. And it's like, okay, now it's dire. And everybody, before they're like, well, you got money, and now we don't have money. And it's like, well, we're still not supportive. So I don't know how you can, it's like, you can't win either way. If you try to go sooner than that, they just throw that up there. Like, look what you got in the bank. You don't need it yet.
And Randy's the expert here. He can further this on your funding cycle. Let's say you're in a system where enough money's coming in that you're cycling 7 years. You're going to build up a surplus, a reserve for the first 2 or 3 years. That about midpoint you peak. This is based on inflation, because keep in mind, for the most part, there's an inflation fighter in school funding. In other words, as inflation goes up, the schools don't get more money. Everything's based on a dollar amount. You're froze, when you pass millage, you're frozen a dollar amount, not at millage. They did that, I think it was House Bill 920 in the 1970s, late 70s, because inflation was going faster than the cost of running a school district, and schools were actually rich. They didn't have enough places to spend their money.
Thank you, Will. What Will just did for everybody's benefit is define the term effective millage.
You have voted millage, which for Huron is around 90 mils, 95.
That's for the whole taxing district.
Right.
The school is 73 of that.
Okay. I thought, okay, for the whole area. To give you an idea, I think effective millage is about 45 mils.
The whole area.
The whole area. So
Yeah.
what's happened is all this millage is passed, but because of everything going up in cost, the effective rate, or how much money you're bringing in, stays. Your effective rate is about half of the voted rate. And that's because it's gone down over the years, because the price of everything in this area has gone up. So I lost my line of thought there.
Well, to put that in perspective, permanent improvement levy, we're not talking about permanent improvement levy, but that's an example. That's in 1986, 3 mills produces $380,000. 2021, it's 1 mill producing $380,000. That permanent improvement levy produces the exact same amount of money, but not exact, a little bit more money because you got new construction stuff in there, but essentially the same amount of money as it did 34 years ago. And so, as Will pointed out, and we showed last month at our board meeting, we got 73 mills of voted levy. Part of that, there's a little bit in there for the library, public library, that we're the taxing agency for. But we're down to effective millage less than 30, 29 and a half mills. So if you look at the total millage drop, it's all in the schools, because the township, they're allowed to tax collection go up, but we're not. And that's going to be, and that's why you get the 5 to 7 year issue is you can pass new money today, but it can't grow. New construction can grow, but if you think about $380 million tax base, $1 million in new home construction is $350,000. It's not going to obviously move the needle.
So what is our action point? What is our moving forward, our action that we need to do today?
I think that's what we need to discuss. That's what Will and I discussed, I asked Will, are we at the point? Is it just a waste of time and treasure? Put something on the ballot at this point. And I know we voted it in. And like I said, I'll take responsibility for that. I underestimated, what the feeling of the community was. I really did. I didn't think, especially, when I reached out to Will right away, that we would have problem getting people together. And then as we were rejected in this, we learned more and more about what's going on. We could keep plowing forward into November. Or we could, I guess it's either, we have one of two options in my mind. We keep it on, we try to do our best with the committee, or we take it off, but we can't keep the status quo. If we take it off, and right off the bat, we are looking at not only things on this sheet, but we're looking at, in my mind, a restructuring of the school district while simultaneously preparing for a levy that we're going to have to put on again. This is just a postponement. This isn't something. So simultaneously, we're preparing for a levy that we're going to definitely have to put on in while we restructure the school district, and while, most importantly, we try to win over our stakeholders and community members, so that when we do inevitably put that levy back on, maybe the first call that we make to someone to be a co-chair will be an enthusiastic yes, because they like what they're seeing. We can't keep the status quo if we decide to pull the levy off the ballot.
Can I ask Will a question?
Sure.
So, Will, when you've had conversations with potential levy co-chairs, what is the number one reason that people don't want to stick their neck out?
I don't know if there's a number one reason, but there was a common thread. And one was, got such things as one person, they just had a baby. Another person just had a new job. Couple people were intimidated by all the negative stuff, especially Facebook. Almost all of them had questions. And these are supposedly your frontline supporters. Almost all of them had questions about certain things that have gone on or are going on. I found maybe a half a dozen major issues that kept surfacing. Anytime you have a levy, there's a couple different philosophies of taking on money, additional money, but money is the number one issue. Let's face it, in this community, probably almost 50% retirees now. And even though some of those retirees make more than you and I will ever see, it's still a fixed income. And there are a number of people that have no extra money. And how do you ask them to give up more money when they're living day to day, paycheck or pension check, pension check? They don't have it. So money's always the number one issue. Now, coming off that, you're going to have questions like the abatements. Okay. And the more you look into it, you'll find there is no winner. Schools don't win in an abatement issue. You can't win. Keeping in mind that the city, township, municipality bases their income on basically income, jobs. They want people working. You don't get much money from the retirees. Okay. Schools base those on, base their income on property tax. Now, some schools go on income tax. That's always an option. There's pros and cons both ways. Bottom line, there are people out there who want an income tax, probably because it excludes them. And there are people out there who want a property tax 18% of Erie County, I believe, is run, or 18% of Huron, it might be, at Huron Township's rentals. Okay? Now think about that. They don't get hit with a property tax, at least not directly. They get hit indirectly if the guy raises rent. Okay? But again, almost half the population in Huron now is probably retired or about that age. So you got that whole, I don't know. But some of the other issues, of course, the legal issues. And when I talk to people, they go all the way back to Fred Fox era. People don't forget. Okay, so you have money, you have the abatements, you have the legal issues. Tied into the legal issues, of course, is school safety. So you get that stuff. I think you're getting still a negative feedback from the COVID decisions. Again, and if you looked at the polls, that was about a 50-50 thing. You're not going to win. Half the people are going to like you and half the people are not going to like you. When I was at Sheffield, and not to digress, we wanted to put in this controversial policy called dress uniforms. And I told our board, okay, I'll look into it, but I won't put that out there unless we get 2/3 support. We got 60% support for it. I wouldn't put it on. I wanted 67% support. So some of these things you can't win. Abatements, there's about half the people are going to love you and half the people are going to hate you. And you're kind of stuck with that. But those are some of the major issues. There's always personality conflicts. Someone doesn't like someone, or someone had a problem with someone in the past and didn't like how it was handled. There's always that. Of course, all this comes out, especially when you go to them. And if you ask them to do something, they don't have to think too hard to find a reason to say no. Same thing when you ask for more money. People can come up with a lot of reasons to say no. Understandable. We only have so much money. But those were some of the things I heard most of. Time commitment, the negativism, and to be honest with you, I even heard it's going to be a new board, going to be a new superintendent. Some of the things I heard, let's wait and see what they do. And lame duck, you can almost say an interim superintendent is a lame duck. They're here for a limited time. And I dealt with this when I was hired by Norwalk for a year to be superintendent. Lame ducks are looked at differently than someone who's going to be there and have to live with their decisions. So you get lame duck Board of Education, lame duck superintendent. I can't even think of some of the others I heard. But John and I talked to a lot of people, and they're not coming forth. And I'm digressing a little bit. I'm answering more than your question. We tried a couple different things at Sheffield. And this idea, which by the way, John Jones gave me a book, I think he got from OSBA. I have to get back to him. Very similar to the plan that we used at Sheffield. Now, I don't know which came first. We worked with the architects, MKC out of Canton. Got a lot of the information from them, and they may have gotten the information from this book. The bottom line is to run a community-based levy campaign. And I basically, John and I have had this conversation, maybe a couple of you. If you're asking for a renewal, you can low key it. If there's no increase in taxes, you could probably low key it. If you're asking for new money, you have to use a blitz. You have to blitz with an army. The book says basically you need a central, they call it a steering committee of 6 to 10 people. John and I talked, no, I call it the central committee. That's what we call it at Sheffield. You need 10 to 15. You need a chairperson for every one of your subcommittees. And you come up with, you come up with 10, 12 subcommittees with no problem. You divide it how you want. You have to have, you have to have 10 to 15 of the frontliners, people who will go out and talk. People that will stand up on the stage at McCormick and get blistered with questions. And keep smiling, and keep answering, and if they don't know the answer, they take their name and say, we'll get back to you. That wasn't there. The book says you need 40 people in the secondary area. I say you need 50 to 100. We'll go with 75. But right there, you need about 100, the 90 to 100 committed people to pull this off. We pretty much had that in Sheffield. We passed, I think it was $34 million bond issue to build a new middle school, high school with this method. And we were told, you don't have a prayer. We passed the first time. The system will work, but it's all based on one thing: community support. And unfortunately, I find this kind of ironic. The last time you passed new money was 16 years ago or whatever. The majority of the parents, the majority of the administration, the majority of your staff were not involved 16 years ago. Renewals are a different creature. Pass new money, it's a whole lot more difficult. One of the problems going 15 years, you don't have hardly anyone who's experienced this, including the parents. They haven't been through this. Now, some of the board members, your kids were in school, and you remember what this was like going through this. You had a handful of very energetic frontline people who, a couple of them, I don't think you can hold back.
Yeah.
And that makes the difference. But it doesn't exist right now. And a lot of it has to do with all these issues that need to be addressed. Well, maybe you need to address the issues. My 2 cents, it doesn't matter. I'm all but out. I will work as a consultant. If you can come up with some people, I will even be, I think my wife Mary will help. We'll work in Grand Forest. We've done it before, door to door or whatever. I'll be glad to consult. But I don't see, I'm too old to put in that time and effort and energy into something that I don't see being able to pass right now. Got to deal with the issues first. Or now there's another way to go about this. There's this plan, or you deal with the issues. And the third way is what I did when we first got to Sheffield. Day 2, we had like a 7.9 mil issue on the ballot. Didn't have a prayer. It went down, not quite as bad as Huron's went down, but it went down, I think 70-30. Okay. Bottom line, we went into fiscal emergency. We tried it a couple more times, went into fiscal emergency, then basically cut the crap out of it. I had to cut 1.4 million with about 8% of the total budget. And I cut everything.
Do you have control over that part of it? Or were you?
Not
told?
exactly.
So that's a big issue,
Yeah.
right?
When the commission comes in, the oversight commission comes in.
Maybe explain that whole thing to everybody, because this
That's
is,
true.
this
When you
is,
go into fiscal emergency, the
interesting.
state basically sends in, the guy we had was a guy named Roger Nils, who has a cottage in Heidelberg. Roger came in, looked at the books, looked at the bottom line, and basically said, you need to cut $1.4 million. It was my job, the school board's job, to decide where the $1.4 million came from. We were told what to do, but not how to do it.
And
So
and there's a committee that gets formed, they form
they form a committee, and I can't remember the exact makeup. Huron went through it way back just before you guys all got on the board.
Yeah, I was here when we went through it. There was a consultant that they gave us, but the autonomy that we had was to cut. The problem we had at the time was the language in the teacher contract for riffing was such that, and it's complicated, but you have to start with the last person that was hired as usual. But if you get to that next person and you can't spare them on the RIF list, then the RIF stops. In other words, you couldn't reach over seniority to cut programs that weren't going on. you had to go strictly from the bottom of seniority up, which meant that we literally made an index card for every teacher in this district and what they were certified in. We would have moved them around like chess pieces, but by being in fiscal emergency, the state suspended that, which is almost why we went on strike, so that we could overreach and cut programs, not have to stop that RIF before we got to the money we wanted to save. So that compounded the need for money, because you're in fiscal emergency, you're negotiating a contract, which we're going to do next year. And we're now not following the RIF policy as per state. So let me tell you, the feelings around this place, if you can believe it, we're worse than it is now. But we've been through worse in my mind. But it
We've got
isn't
that
fun.
language, so now we wouldn't have that.
We have new language. We don't have to do that. That's why.
The state commission will override the local contract, but not if they don't have to. They're gonna tell you, make the cuts, follow the contract. But if you can't, then they will relax your contract requirements. But they do want you to follow the contract. And that creates other issues. What, I mean, the easiest way, no favorites. Just cut 8 to 10%. I cut 8 to 10% of the administrators. A board president's son went back in the classroom. He was principal. I put him back in the classroom. His mother didn't like that. However, I think he liked it. He's an elementary gym teacher. He might go back into the gym, but you still have the cutting is brutal. It's nasty. It creates a lot of ill feelings, but it was necessary. After we cut that, we then passed the levy. I think it was 4 tries down. We passed the levy and started bringing things back. One of the things I cut was high school. I cut choir. It was a band school. Choir didn't have the enrollment. I cut choir. You can't cut high school choir in an Ohio school. That's unheard of. We did it. We had to save the money. We had to cut $1.4 million, and we did.
John, didn't we go from like 120 down to 90 staff, something like that? But
Made a
what,
lot of- I know, I think out of the high school, I cut 5 people.
but really and truly what galvanized the community was when we said we weren't on board then, but when they said next is athletics. When you talk and hearing about taking away athletics, boy, does that get everybody.
That's pretty normal.
The
I
agency
mean,
got excited, and they got galvanized, and they went out and they helped knock on doors, and they did everything.
Basically, what we were going to become is a school that was open for classes. You know, like at the high school, 7:30, dismissal at 2:35. By 3:15, everything was shut off and everyone was home. It was not fun. It's not going to be fun.
There's districts that have done that. If you look at them, they sometimes don't rebound.
I
I
can
mean,
tell
their
you,
little town is, their makeup and the chemistry in the town is not the same as it was. I mean, Vermillion still isn't the same town it once was, really. This is some of that stuff they had to do. They just never really fully rebounded. It's tough.
I can tell you in 2005, Chillicothe, I was in the levy committee. That spring, the board canceled, that winter canceled spring sports. Levy had not passed. We passed the levy in May, but we cut spring sports. High school lost 200 students that they never got back.
that should
16 years
reinforce what
later, they
Randy's
never got them
saying.
back.
With open enrollment,
What will happen with what Randy is saying is right on the nose. When you start cutting everything, St. Pete's will blossom, they'll be busting at the seams, Montessori will grow, probably even St. Mary's and Sandusky will grow, but open enrollment, Berlin, Milan, people will have to put limitations on because the parents will take their kids elsewhere when you start making.
And there wasn't that option in 05. There was no open
it's not
enrollment
open
then.
enrollment, but it was the parochial schools.
And the point is, that you're talking about the order of magnitude, that's that list is, I mean, we're not by any measure that. Okay, there's a couple areas that based on state-based funding, we could probably question, it's 1 or 2, right? State-based funding, the new model said you need, here's a ratio of students and all those, that's kind of what their benchmark is. we're not far off of that. There may be, like I said, there may be a couple positions, those are built into those lists. So
I don't think this list is intended to be exhaustive.
it's not
I didn't mean it.
exhaustive.
Just because something's not on here, it doesn't mean it's not on the table.
But this talking about cut and choir. We're talking about, if you want to get to $1 million, it's choir, it's band, it's art. It's PE where it's not required. So that gets to $1 million. That's a lot, right? It's going to take a lot to get $2 million in reductions. Because you already cut, millions of dollars in the last
The
15
big
years.
difference between when you did it and when we did it is that the options are so easy now. They can go whatever school they want to. So we'll never get those kids back, a lot of them. I mean, they'll leave because you're not offering a program they want, and we might not get them back. I mean, it's a lot more dire than what it was, I think.
Well, and that's why I said that this list isn't intended to be exhaustive. You're right, we wouldn't get those kids back. But then the question becomes, what do we look at to cut that doesn't affect programming that would lead kids to leave? And the answer is pretty simple, and it's not a good one. Staff.
There's not a whole lot there.
I don't dispute that, but I haven't looked at, and I'm going to, and I will say that in my time at North Point, I've done numerous staffing studies in districts. Really would like, before we rule that out, and again, I'm not questioning anybody's facts, I'm new here, but I would like to look at, master schedules, see what our class sizes are, how many, what that looks like. And it very well could be that we're as height is can be. But like anything else, we need to do our due diligence in every area. Obviously, it was done very well before I got here with this. But, tough times call for tough measures.
When does our facilities audit start?
They canceled the meeting. He had a conflict, so we're coming up with another date.
Okay.
And again, to be quite candid, when you look at the top of the list, I've said this before, I don't want to sound flippant. We don't need somebody from the Ohio School Facilities Commission to tell us that McCormick is antiquated for 7-8 education. Doesn't mean that the building isn't still of some use. We don't need somebody to tell us that we have empty classrooms at Shawnee and Woodlands that we're not using. We know that. That's got to be part of this equation. I haven't even went to Woodlands yet. I know we have 4 empty classrooms or potentially empty classrooms that are used for storage right now in Shawnee. That's a whole grade B in this business.
And the fact that we have 4 cafeterias.
Exactly, for everything.
Right. I mean, there are issues. There.
And look, McCormick's an obvious one, but it doesn't need to do it. Doesn't get you there.
So as I look at what Will's talking about with community disengagement, I would have to say the top one would probably have to be the lawsuit issue, no busing, and pay to play. Are those maybe in the top 10, top 5 issues that we're dealing with community disengagement?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair statement. If you go top 10, and again, Will and I have heard similar, we've heard a little different, I guess, from my point of view. Biggest thing I heard was that the May levy, was kind of snuck on. We've talked about that. We know it wasn't. We apologize if people got that perception, but perception's reality. And that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to get right back on the ballot in November, was just to, just to let our, community know, in an apologetic manner, if we portrayed sneaking this on, sorry, so here it is again. Then after that, I think the lawsuits, I think I've heard from students that I had in school now that have children that are starting out, they've told me that the facilities look the same as they did when they went through school. You know, there's a lot of reasons. I've had people tell me, okay, pay to participate, I've just paid my levy.
Mhm.
That's my yes vote.
So is there, I guess this is probably directed to Randy. Is there any way we can squeeze funds to bring busing back for the high school and to eliminate pay to play? To just give a little bit of confidence to our community to say, maybe we made a mistake, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Well, you can do that. And I would say, you know what, the community, you're getting what you voted for. Okay, I'm gonna be a little harsh about this. We're saving $100,000 between those two things. We know it's a drop in the bucket, doesn't get us there.
Mhm.
We need to cut, we're gonna need to cut millions, and we're not there. But yes, you can withdraw that. The high school busing in my mind, it's a problem for a couple of people. Denise will show you how many, very few kids were transported, but we get the routes down, and that's a big savings, right? That's a cost, but you can do anything. If you ask me, do we have money? Yeah, we have money in the bank, but what are you going to give up? What else do you want? What do you want to have? Those things were, remember, we put those in, those are messages that this is real, right? And I had a parent tell me is, I would have voted for the levy if I would have known these things. Those are important to me. If you're going to cut sports, tell me, I'll vote for the levy. I'm not going to vote for the levy until you tell me what you're going to cut. And back his high school daughter was sitting there, goes, well, you if you cut sports, I said, you're going to go somewhere else. She goes, that's right. How many kids at the high school participate in extracurricular? 70% in the fall?
At least, yes.
Guess what? They could all leave and you end up not having a high school. But again, I'm kind of passionate about this. We have a need. The board, made a decision, but you certainly can rescind it. You have that option. I say on the transportation side, it might be difficult at this point because Denise has rerouted everything. I'm not going to speak for it. I think we're talking how to present to you, and the new routes are, in my mind, fabulous. There'll be less time on the buses for the students that we have. They're going to make a lot more sense than they did, and we are saving the district money. But we're looking. We can do it.
Just a question.
And I'll share with you, from my point of view, it hasn't changed when I came to see you as an athletic. I will sit here and I guess Randy and I would have to disagree. I'm totally opposed to pay to participate. It isn't within it. Same thing I told you as a booster. It's not within our culture here. It's not going to solve our problems. I think that I just don't like the policy. And I would be, the thing of it is like Randy or any treasurer would point out, if we do away with that, we have to find something else in the pie, make cuts to make up for that money. So again, we can't take that out and keep the status quo of bringing it back. We have to look elsewhere to make up that.
And I'll say, the other big, let me mention the lawsuits. I can't say much because the lawsuit attorney's been in. It's going to be at least 2 years. It's not going away. We maybe next year at this time will have finished depositions. All right. And our attorney is on it, and the advice of the attorney is we're not talking about it. When the new board comes in, he's going to come in and say, new board, you can't talk about it. And remember, the insurance company is paying for these guys, so it's not. They will eventually, there'll be a collaboration on what the board wants to do, and the insurance company, but the insurance company's money at this point driving this thing, and they're gonna fight it as they see appropriate. We obviously have some guidance, so that's not going away. We're gonna have 2 years of that, so don't think that's gonna be solved. Now, the other things, obviously, we have the control of, we can work on, and we need to.
Then why don't we work on the things we have control over?
Yeah.
Which are community perception, busing, pay to play. We have control over those.
I think the busing thing is a great example for our situation. And when you look at these tough decisions that you're making versus sports and stuff, because you're impacting a whole bunch of people, busing, and help me with the numbers. When you look at just the high school, so you're going to make some people unhappy with decisions that you make, and you're trying to limit that as much as you can because you're working on your reputation and you're trying to get the community to believe in you. But when you take something like busing, you get a few phone calls from a few people. That doesn't mean that you've made a bad decision. how many people ride that bus on a daily basis to high school? So we have a chance of maybe totally making 25 people mad at us. You got to weigh that. That's 25. No,
Pardon me, that's,
wait a second.
yeah,
So,
that's,
so I'm saying you're making the decision that 20, at least, how many people do we have to ride that bus daily, roughly?
Just high school students.
Just the high school students,
There's the potential for 87.
right?
When we looked at the numbers, actually between 20, 25 on any given day.
Okay.
And 25 is more in the winter time, where you might have a student that would drive in the spring and summer, and maybe the parent wouldn't have them drive.
So I'm not saying whether it's a good decision or bad decision. I'm saying when you're making decisions, you're saying, okay, there's 25 people who are going to be unhappy about the decision. Versus sports, where we've made half the 80% of our kids participate in some type of extracurricular. So there's huge impact. So those are the kinds of decisions. You can't keep everybody happy. But it's like, okay, the busing thing is going to save X number of dollars. I know I'm going to have 25 families mad at me. Those are the kind of decisions you make. That's what's so tough about
But
it.
I don't even think it's a matter of families mad. It's,
They don't like your decision.
we've put a hardship on 25
Okay,
people
okay.
to
Then
get to
make
school.
make
Can I
some
finish?
decisions, make
Could I-
some
could I
cuts,
finish?
make some
Could I,
decisions,
could
make
I
some
finish
cuts.
my thought?
Yeah.
Without being interrupted, please? I think we put a hardship on 25 families or students to get their students to school, which is the primary reason they're coming to school, is for education. I understand the hardship we're putting on our student athletes. But I think the whole reason students are enrolled is for school. And you put a hardship on those families, those 25 families, then, as we've talked about, have the potential to open enroll somewhere else where they can get their student to school. I just think it's a hardship. It's not an extracurricular. It's not athletic. This is getting someone to school. The primary reason we're in business. So I guess that's my concern.
I think, I'm sorry, we voted in April unanimously that if we weren't going to pass the levy in May, that we would look at pay to play and high school transportation. May, we didn't pass the levy, we didn't pass the levy big time. So after saying we're going to look at these cuts, the community still voted. So I respectfully dispute that cutting busing for the high school and invoking pay to play has put us in this spot. This spot predates those board actions.
I have a question for Randy or Denise, I don't know which, concerning busing. I see on this reduction idea list, says reduce transportation to the state minimum, $50,000 to $100,000. So is that the $100,000? Is that inclusive of what we've already done? Or is this an addition to what we've done? Okay, so reduction, and as we're here to talk about this as detailed as we can, that means that we're going to, if we consider something like this, students would have to walk further to a bus stop. Is that what I mean? No.
No. So that,
What's the reduction part other than the high school that we already did?
this is the part that, as a parent, and, I don't live in this community per se, but, I am a parent, and it hurts me to see any child not be able to, have everything that they need. I worry about having to go to this next step even more than where we are now with just eliminating high school busing. What we potentially would be doing is to go to state minimum, which this district is only 5 square miles each way, or southwest east. So we would eliminate from the statement, from where we are now, we're 1 mile radius from each school building. That would take us to 2 miles. So potentially we would only be busing 2 square miles, where now we would be, even with this reduction, doing 4. So you're talking 2 miles from each building. Elementary, everyone would be 2 miles from each building. So
We
you're-
would not bust them.
We would not bus. So it worries me to ever get to that point. You know, the difficulty with high school busing, no one wanted to see that. That was a difficult thing. But to get to this next point, it is terrifying to me. I don't ever want to have to see that, have to come to that. I don't know if that helps.
And what they mean when we say limit that, it comes down to eliminating routes, right? So if we have 5 or 6 routes today, that by reducing the amount of busing, we go to 3 routes, which means 3 drivers, 3 buses, and all that. So that's what it comes down to. That's where the savings is just the number. And the number of hours that are like the new routing, the bus drivers are going from 6 to 4 hours. And we eliminated a route. So all those efficiencies built into those numbers.
That's what I was hoping to hear, is that we could route and yes, to cause some inconvenience for a lot more people, but still be able to give them rides. In other words, I mean, I know at one time, and again, I don't know for sure what's going on. We had a lot of bus stops just on Main Street going out of town. And my question was, is there a way to kind of consolidate things like that, still provide busing to everybody, and at the same time add the high school kids back? In other words, can we save an equal amount or I know it might be less, but can we revise the heck of a time to ask when school starts?
But that's exactly that's being done.
Yeah, but I'm talking about it and
And
getting the high school kids again.
well,
So-
that means adding a route, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Potentially, that would be, that would have to add a route. So right now, I have cut it down to where we used to have multiple stops in areas. So like if you go down to Village Green, it would be multiple stops in the cul-de-sac, places like that. Now students have an assigned bus stop. They'll be walking to that bus stop. So their stops have been cut considerably. Each route now is around an hour. We don't want students on the bus longer than an hour, especially when you do the elementary student. That's a long time for a student to be on a bus. And then you're going to cause parents to start to just drive their students even more and not even take busing, because they're going to know, hey, if it takes me 10 minutes to get back and forth to school, I don't want my kid on a bus for an hour when I could literally drive them for 10 minutes. So, you could potentially lose even more ridership if you increase the by adding on high school buses, because each stop that you take, you can potentially add on anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. It's not, and that has to be added in start of the route and not at the end of the route, because ultimately you have to get to the building by a certain time. So the more you add on, the earlier those students are going to have to get on the bus and the longer your route times. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of some way to do a mix so that high school, because I think it's appalling that the state of Ohio allows us to do this. I think, to me, the problem is in Columbus. We should not have this option. To count what Mrs. Mass says, we're supposed to educate kids and we want to get them here. We're allowed to not bus high school kids.
Yeah, my kids' high school, they've not had busing in 30 years for high school. And it's not a 20 square mile district like we are. It's much bigger. And they cut it back in the 80s or something like that and never returned it. So it's hard because you got to cultural, but it's not unusual.
Oh, I believe that. I'm just trying to think if there's any way to be creative that we could.
Listen, the Transponder thing's doing I think Denise working on the routes and we're cutting the routes down, keep it short the time the kids are on the bus, and that's what's really, and the stops really dictate that.
Is that what our families want? Or if they want their high school kids picked up and all it does is extend a ride on the bus, then that's the choices. And what about all these parents at Woodlands and Shawnee every day that pick their kids up and bring them to school? Can you count on them not ever taking a bus and picking up high school kids instead of worrying about busing the Woodlands or something? I don't know. it just seems like there's so much, there's so much differences. Oh, I don't know how to say this. It's just,
Majority of riders are elementary, the Shawnee and Woodlands. The
It's hard to
majority
tell
of
that.
academic students is small, and the majority of high school students are even small. So, and that is taking into consideration all the parents that pick up. You know, the only people that are on the bus route are the people that have, you know, done the survey and riders that we know have ridden every single year. So I've eliminated that piece out too.
well, you're answering what was on my mind, trying to see if there's a happy medium here, because, you know, we did make a decision, and I mean, from here on in, other decisions we're gonna make, they're not gonna make people happy either. So unfortunately, that's the ugly part of the job. But I can say I'm not necessarily in favor of pulling the levy, because I still think that we will be derelict in what our responsibility is. And that is we only have one choice, and that's to ask for more money, the public. And if we don't, then we do it in May, but we're still gonna have to do these cuts, as I think Mr. Ruff mentioned, like right now. And so, you know, maybe we do some cuts more now, minimally, see what happens to the levy. Like I think Randy said several times, then that's what the people in our community want. They don't want these things on this list. I mean, it sounds cold, but I don't know what other choices we have. Even cutting Woodlands, I mean, this says $250,000. Well, that helps, but it's not, I mean, I'm sorry, McCormick, forgive me, but it's not $2 million. So that's
And
my
then you
speech.
have to look at the cost factor of putting a levy on, because when you put something on in the fall, you have multiple entities sharing the cost of that levy. When we went on in the spring, we were on by ourselves, so it's a much greater cost to the district, or like to the Board of Elections, to do for just one itty bitty little school district. Sometimes you get lucky and the health department's on, and you know, you have other entities that are on the spring ballot, but you know, when we passed out of fiscal emergency in 05, it was on a May primary. So, I mean, it's doable to win then, but it does come at a higher cost factor. And if we're trying to cut money, even $15,000-$20,000, I don't know, how much was it, Randy, to put that on the primary on in May? How much did it cost?
We get the bill, probably about 18.
See? And what will it be in the fall when we're on with? Yeah. So, I mean, those are things to consider. I think you might think, well, that's not a lot of money, but it adds up in there.
If we don't pass in November, remember going in May and passing the same thing, we just lost a year because of the collection process.
Yep.
So that's really critical. So you're thinking about, you probably, if you don't pass in November, you need to think about $500,000 for next school year. And if it doesn't pass in May, then you probably need another $1.5 billion for the following school year. I'm just, rough numbers. But I think we gotta be thinking failure in November means $500,000 reductions, whatever they have to be. And that's assuming that you keep in place what we have. If you bring back, transportation and play to pay, then add another $100,000 and find somewhere else.
Mr. Ruff, can I ask another question?
Sure.
So if when we consider some course of action to look into some of the issues that Mr. Folger has brought up and that you mentioned that need to be looked in, you have some idea of what that would look like? Would that be a committee? Would that be school board members? Would that be people
Are
that
you talking about like to pass like a levy committee or an overall course of action for the district?
the part about the perception of what our community thinks of the school district,
Right.
not the levy.
Yeah, I think that I think that what we need to do, you take the levy and we keep it on, irregardless. It's time for this district to be restructured. That's what I think will solve this problem ultimately. And I get it, that, you know, I'm an interim. I get that. However, we can't wait another year. I can't put my feet on the desk and say, well, that was the last guy and this is something for the next guy. And I can't do that, both personally and professionally. I've thought about this. I've talked to people that I respect in education. You know, and I go back and I was thinking last night when we went through our problem in 2005. And, you know, we wanted, and I made, you know, we made cuts here. I remember the atmosphere when we shut down all the teachers' emails, and the OEA from Columbus was up here with a moving van so they could put all their personal things in it because we were going to go on strike. It was about as dark a day as you can get as an educator, you know. But when it was done and the levy passed due to the, you know, the boosters and the people, and the smoke cleared from the cuts, we had a new board come in, things got better quick. And I had a meeting with people from the Lake School District right after that, because they were in the exact position that they had been in. So they came looking for advice. And what I told them, and I think it's relevant now, because I was thinking about this last night, is times are obviously tough, want this. But we have to look at this now as an opportunity to strike. You know, it's time to get off our heels. I'm tired of taking hits on social media for this district. It's time to restructure, revision, bring our community in to do that. You know, as Randy's pointed out correctly many times, you know, we're a 4-building district that doesn't need to be a 4-building. We need to tap into our culture and find out what are the things here that's important to Huron. What do we do best? And bring that out. I can't think of a better time to do that. And it's not going to be easy because we are negotiating next year. But these things aren't easy. Let's face it, they're not. But to me, in thinking of this over the last month, in my mind, it's just my opinion, that's the best way out of this. It's not going to happen overnight. We need to restructure, revision, re-engage, and move forward.
Do you see the community being involved with that?
Absolutely, they have. You know, I made the comment to one of the, a person that I called to be co-chair. And when she, you know, just said I love Huron, and she does. I don't have not met her personally, but I've heard good things, great things about her passion for the district. She doesn't want to get involved because of the atmosphere. She most certainly would love to sit down with whoever it may be, me or a building or a group, and talk about how we can improve things moving forward, how we can restructure, revision, and do all those things. That she's interested in. You know, and you know, yeah, and always advocate for the district. Just not interested in that level. Thanks.
I think we probably would all agree that there's room for restructuring, like taking us from a 4-building to a 3-building district. I would, though, submit that being a 4-building district is a luxury. Having 7th and 8th graders in their own building, anybody who's been a parent of a 7th or 8th grader would say that's kind of nice. That's a weird age. We're looking at potentially having a 7th grader walk by a senior in the hallway. That scares some people. Now we'll have another group come at us. I don't like this. But the restructuring part, we all agree with. There's lively discussion that can happen there. We can be more efficient. But what's lost in the shuffle of all this is an excellent school district. And don't believe me. Don't take my word for it. Go on a website called Niche, or Niche, if you prefer, and look up every school district in this area. Niche is a third-party website that real estate agents use to talk about school districts in so far as somebody looking for a property. What district in a certain area do I want to live in? Do you know there's 1A school district in this area? One, and you're sitting in it. What's interesting is all of this, you got to change, you got to restructure. You're not doing it right. Sometimes I look at people and say, you're wrong. This community is doing it right. We have a great school district with great leaders. And as I said, don't take my word for it. Go to that website. Now, can we get better? Part of the reason I think this community is excellent. Continuous improvement is a priority. Now, in the near term, Mrs. Mast, Mr. Ruff mentioned taking the levy off the ballot. Mr. Jones mentioned, I'm not sure I want to do that. It in a way, it could be seen as irresponsible. Right now, it's on the ballot. If 3 board members don't feel comfortable, then we can make a change, and we can make a change right now. I don't sense from the conversation, we have 3 board members that want to change direction on that. Am I right? Mrs. Green? Yeah, let's let the folks tell us. Even given the bad news of Mr. Ruff's report, that we don't have an energized group of individuals, the fact remains, it's on the ballot. By taking it off the ballot, my own view is it's irresponsible for our young people. We're saying, we don't want to fight the good fight. We'll just cancel choir. As soon as Dr. Folger tells me that story, I think of a senior who gets up in the morning passionate about music. We'll just cancel 1 year. We'll pass a levy later. And it's that student's senior year. We're going to axe choir. I'll fight for that student. I'll put it on the ballot. If the community decides to vote no, then so be it. But it's not because I didn't fight for that student.
Couple things just clarified. I would never want, when I say, and when you say restructure, to me, it's no different. I live in the same house that I have for 22 years. It looks a lot different. I like my house a lot, but I've done a lot to it, so it's not the same as it was when I moved in.
Indeed.
That's what I'm thinking. You're improving. Not that we don't like the product we have. You're right. With the niche scores, our test scores are excellent. We all know what we've done in athletics, plus our kids that participate in the academic supplementals, no question about it. And as far in restructuring, I would never be for putting 7th graders in a high school. Most of what we've seen in the area is an 8-12 model. And that's particularly at the BCS district and Carroll Salem, Oak Harbor, and Vermillion, and BCS did very well, as did we were 1 and 2 at BCS on the test scores. So
Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply I don't want to change everything because
that
we're
would be right.
Continuous improvement is always should be a hallmark. And as Mrs. Mass said, do we need 4 cafeterias for 1,300 students? Excellent point.
And that's why you bring in the community. What's their threshold?
And by the way, just, there's not sitting still on this stuff either. There's obviously big stuff at boards, but like cafeteria, for example, our excellent food service director, wearing many hats, has already restructured the Corner cafeteria for this year. It doesn't eliminate it, but we're going to reduce the costs in that.
Excellent.
So we're looking at those things where we can, but we're nibbling, right? It's just like I'm getting our copier contracts up next in a year. We're gonna start that process here shortly. And there's some things we can do, put controls in to reduce the amount of copies, because we spend a lot of money on copy paper and those prices are going way up, but it's nibbling, right? When your supply budget's $5.5 million out of 17 million, even if you don't use the copiers, you don't move the needle, but we're going to still nibble on those things to do what we can.
Indeed.
That's we're not quite counting paper clips, but we're getting close to that kind of stuff.
And many cuts have been made over the years, quietly and methodically by this board and previous boards. An email I once got is, don't you have a lot less enrollment in it? And it sort of was the impetus for me to look at our reductions vis-a-vis diminished enrollment. And in a 10-year span, we had 10% reduction in enrollment and 18% reduction in staff over that 10-year period. So, and as I said, that kind of happened quietly and methodically during the time that we're not asking for new money.
That's a good point. And remember, we also, every time a position comes open, that's the first question. Do we need to fill the position? And, you know, where the enrollment numbers become kind of tricky is at the elementary. Because for Title I reasons, other reasons, when students, you know, if I have 75 students in a grade level, that requires 3 teachers. If I have 76 students, it requires 4. And conversely, I could be down to 60 teachers and I still need 3. I can't eliminate teachers like get down to 50. So you're not looking at 10% reduction in enrollment, you're looking at 25% reductions before you start seeing those the classroom teachers in elementary.
Right.
The opportunities and specials and those kind of things. And or, you know, John came up with Denny and I were looking at those numbers. I'm questioning them all the time. Can we reduce, you know, a teacher here and there for those reasons? And we're looking at those ratios is really, really important. And if we want to keep our federal funding, you know, not that we get a lot, but $200,000 in title grants, Title I is at jeopardy for one teaching position. I don't think it's a fair trade-off.
I guess on the other side of that too, and you go back to the restructuring, you look at the 7-12 types of grade levels that aren't so much self-contained like elementary. That's my understanding that the enrollment, you know, at the middle school that we have just a little over 200 kids, I don't know, 100 at grade level. I don't know if that's fair, 110. So, you know, if you were to restructure, you know, you have 100 8th graders. So if you have a 7-period day and you put 25 kids in 8th grade math, what's going on with those other 2 sections? Teacher can teach 6 sections. You have 100 kids, you put them in 4 sections, they get a planning period, that's 5. What's happening with those other 2? And if they're up at the high school, what's happening with those other 2 is they're picking up 2 sections of high school algebra. Then it trickles down and you potentially get savings in staffing. And I'm not saying that we can do that. I haven't looked at the numbers, but the elementary numbers are different than when you look at 7-12 numbers. We might be tight all the way around. We have to offer, you know, optional classes and those kinds of things, you know, but that's part of restructuring. We don't, those things could change when you put a grade level in another building, because now you have a different group of teachers together, certifications and sections. So it's a lot of things that could happen.
It's really complicated because you start talking at the high school level with our college credit plus students who are taking classes here with our teachers. We're paying our college credit plus bill is pretty high. But if those kids were going off our campus, going to Bowling Green or somewhere else, that cost would double. So when you start looking at that, it's not just students and for teachers, you may want a lower ratio because you're keeping the kids here. Right. And so it's John's got to take a look at those numbers, and it's not a simple algorithm, right?
Of course.
You know, because like I said, I see the college credit plus bill twice a month, and you know, I just hope that we're getting a bang for the dollar. I mean, students are obviously getting the college credit. Hopefully, it's working somewhere because it's a chunk of money that's coming out of our general fund.
And I don't think our parents ever put that together like that. They're graduating seniors going in as a sophomore or junior because of what Huron paid for them to get those classes. So, you know, they took 2 years of tuition and room and board off that family's financial situation. And there's just so much that the public could be educated about, that as far as like what we get from the state compared to like what Sandusky gets, what happens if a student open enrolls, you know, what we, you know, have to give that other district as opposed to what we get. There's just so much that they don't understand. And I think that if we could just get that knowledge out there or that information, that it would really override, as much as you might think, oh, I'm angry about the lawsuit, or I'm angry about, you know, whatever. If people really understand how our funding is so different from district to district, you know, they think Huron's rich. And, you know, John
So
just
does the
said,
state.
yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Right,
They think that Huron's rich. They take their average income Is it times or plus the property value?
Well, with the fair funding plan, it's a free capacity is
Right.
built on three components. 60% is
Right.
which is
Your
improvement.
average income?
It's the property values.
Right.
Okay, so we are a wealthy district, top 10% in the state of Ohio.
Mhm.
Okay, then 20% is based on your state median income. And we are not hugely above it, but we're above state median income. The third 20% is based on federal tax records, and there we are a significant chunk. And I can show you the graph when you compare it to the areas. You know, we're not out of whack on the except for Sandusky. Sandusky is Sandusky and Danbury are the two outliers, opposite directions. Right, Sandusky has low property value. Danbury is out the roof. But so when you take all three of those components, we're in the top 10% state. And the state looks at our capacity and says, Huron, here's the base cost to educate a student. And based on your capacity, we're gonna give you this much money. You need to come up with the rest. And we are. In our capacity, we're less than 100%. So from a state perspective, we don't pay our fair share. Whereas the district I came from, they pay more. They're low property value, low income, and they're at over 100% of their capacity. They pay more than their fair share. And again, it's not, we can argue whether it's fair or not, but that's just the way it is.
Indeed.
Yeah, and so we're gonna get, and our funding is flat, and it's gonna be flat, but it's because we're guaranteed our FY19 funding. So even if enrollment changes right now, the next 2 years, we know our funding's gonna be. It's not gonna, unless our enrollment makes a significant jump, it's not gonna go up. It's just not gonna fall like it could if they actually use the formula.
Well, we must be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, and that is to educate the community and say, if we don't get additional funding, the state commission's coming.
We're by the end of not this next school year, they would be, unless something changes, they would be in our district's lab.
I mean, there aren't enough cuts to make up. I mean, to make up that delta.
Well, but obviously the forecast out in 2025, and we're out of money. We're negative money in the cash. That's running a $2 million deficit, right?
Mhm.
So the costs are going up the next year, like 26, 27. It's even worse. So 2 million doesn't get you past 2025. Right. So it's just going to get worse. Now, again, you got contract negotiations and things like that, but what can you get to slow down that cost growth?
And speaking of contract negotiations, if we don't ask, we lose a little credibility at the negotiating table. We didn't even ask.
Yeah, I just put in perspective, most of we've given 1% cost of living, if you will, over the last 4 years. Most of the districts around here 2.5%.
Mhm.
And the only district I know is in the same financial shape we are is Norwalk, probably. They get a lot more federal money than we do.
And so by chew gum and walk at the same time, maximizing our limited resources, the restructuring, the closing of McCormick School.
But repurposing would be a better.
Yes, repurposing,
Because
closing it as a structure designed for reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. How about that?
There's two factors that'll figure in, and this is positive news. I did have a meeting with the folks at Montessori, and they're very interested in moving out of the annex and into McCormick and occupying their building. So that building would still be used for an educational purpose. As Randy pointed out, we do need the gym and auditorium. And theoretically, the rent that they pay would be used to invest, into that building to make sure, as we are now, safe and sound, for what they want to do. So that's the good news. They would love to have that building. Now, the other thing, and I think we're okay legally, but there is a goofy little part of House Bill 110, the budget bill, talks about, and nobody knows why they put this in there, but there's something in there about if you have a building the previous year that was used less than, I think, 60% for educational purposes, then it has to be offered to a local charter, satellite campus type of things. And you know what they're not wanting is the districts, I guess, for whatever reason, moving their board offices into school buildings and nothing else going on there or something. Now, if we do take a look at McCormick, it's being used for educational use this year. And it would be, I think we're okay with that law. But if we go that route with McCormick, then Montessori is extremely interested to expand their operation.
And I think the 2022-2023 school year is what we're talking about, right? For that change. I mean, it's
The 2022-23, this would,
and to institute that change, what would be this board's deadline for action?
I would have a plan to the board by November, by the election.
Excellent.
So would everybody back up a grade? Would there be one more like?
You know,
K
I
through
don't
4
know.
at Shawnee?
I don't know yet.
I mean-
You know, I'm about to dive into that. You know, if you use the examples of other districts, you know, I have to talk to them, but you know, an 8-12 building, and then, you know, you could go perhaps P3 at a grade level, third grade level to Shawnee, and then a 4, 5, 6, 7 at Woodlands and intermediate. And you'd still have room for growth.
But again, when you look at our demographics, we're just getting older.
Exactly.
You
That's
know,
why, you know, the restructuring in a positive manner is a good idea. So our demographics don't support 4 buildings.
Sue Doherty, who you may or may not know, the director of serving our seniors, told me this years ago that at that point, Erie County was second in the state of Ohio for their senior population portion, and that was just going to keep growing. And let's be real, it's a beautiful county. A lot of people like my parents go to Florida in the winter, Huron in the summer. They don't want to leave, but we're aging, and our enrollment, you know, people aren't having babies. They're not, you know, adding more students into the district. So those are things that, you know, really change the whole landscape of how they feel about funding and, you know, what the needs are of our students.
I'd like to interject something just real quickly, just so it's out there, you know, 8-12, you'd also look at 7-12, right? Because of licensure.
Right, yeah, we look at everything, right,
We
yeah.
can look at time because now
True.
teacher's licensure is a 7-12 licensure. So if you could have all that in one building, cut down on the travel time, you could look at varying start times. There wouldn't be such crossing of paths and things like that.
Well, physically, I know we're getting way ahead of it, but physically, because I was at a district where we did that too, but they were able to keep the 7th and 8th graders totally away from the
That's
9th.
where the
or 10th.
restructuring part of this would probably be a classroom, not a space or study hall or, you know, a Tiger Union area. So, you know, we have 2 computer labs in the building. We're going to be a 1-to-1 district, and we need computer labs then. So those would be tough decisions that we're looking at. And I like the November date because that's going to be a lot of work, not only running a school year, but planning for a restructuring.
Schedule.
Yeah, and this will be part of your plan in November. So you've got a few months to study things like teacher certification.
That's the big,
Yeah.
that's the first thing on my list is the certification. And I know, you know, the beautiful thing that they told us the last time we did a facilities thing with this building is all these walls are movable because the load bearing is the hallways. So when we redid the science lab years ago, it looked like a bowling alley because they took all the walls out. And so, for example, the art room up there, that could easily become 2 classrooms if you moved art down to what. Don't do this. I'm just thinking, this is when I was here, but you know, art could go down to the old choir room because choir could be in the band room, which was the old shop. So you could instantly create 2 classrooms in the art. That's just an example. Those are of
Sure.
all the things that we would we would look at.
There's some room for efficiency gains.
Right, and the other thing about a 7-12 building, when I talk about like our culture of Huron, we have always said, you go back to post-secondary enrollment option, which was much more restrictive than college credit plus. We had about 60 kids that went to main campus, which was probably more than every school in Erie County combined. So we would figure in with college credit plus. As Randy said, we have qualified teachers. The kids do like to stay here. We can't prevent them from going out to campus for college credit plus. We can just create those things to give them incentives to stay here. They like to go out to campus, believe me.
Of course.
They like it. So that's another thing we look at is by the afternoon session, how empty or, what the, certification wise. There's lots to look at, but we'll have a plan.
I'm going to, if you'll indulge me, for those who don't have this page, who might be live streaming, I'm actually going to take 90 seconds and read it because I think it's critical. Long-term reduction ideas, order of magnitude, annual savings, close McCormick, $200,000 to $250,000 annual savings. And we're considering doing that right now as we speak, whether or not we pass the levy. Am I right? Reduce transportation to state minimums, $50,000 to $100,000. Eliminate academic supplementals, $75,000 to $100,000. Give me an example of an academic supplemental.
National Honor Society.
National Honor Society is an academic supplemental.
Council.
Debate, student council. Okay. Eliminate athletics, $400,000 to $500,000. Eliminate special offerings. These are programs like art and music, $750,000 to $1 million. Quit the joint recreation district, $40,000 to $50,000. What's the value to us of the joint recreation district?
That is a question that I would have a hard time.
I think
answering.
Jody's got
Not that
some
it's not
shared
of value.
Shared use facilities with the township and the city that our athletes can use.
It's a great
Okay.
partnership. Yeah.
Okay, we access the facilities.
Yeah.
Excellent. Eliminate project lead the way, $60,000 to $90,000 per year. What is project lead the way?
Junior high STEAM.
STEAM. Okay, excellent. That stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
It's actually STEM. Actually, that's just STEM.
So STEM is minus the art. Am I correct?
Project Lead the Way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, some schools have a STEM with 2 M's because they add medical. Unfortunately, Dr. LaFay left. She'd be impressed by me knowing that. Ideas for potential negotiation, wage freeze. Now, these are items that are out of our control. We have to negotiate with a union to make these savings. So we can't just, with our own pen, 5-0, execute these savings.
To give you an example of how tough that can be, when we were in fiscal emergency and negotiating union, we brought 0 raise to the table. They started at 11% a year.
So that could possibly yield 225,000, 275,000.
What that means is no step increases, no increases for education, but built-in stuff that are not cost of living.
Right.
Because they're already got built in the budget 0 with raises anyway into the forecast. So this is the stuff that they're negotiating the contract that happens based on teachers' longevity and their ability to get move on the scale for education.
Increase employee insurance share. Again, that could possibly be $40,000 to $80,000. And it's not to say we're not going to try to do these things in negotiation.
And we've already done that with the administrators, by the way. So
Thank you to the administrators.
Insurance.
Indeed. Eliminate certified education stipend. Explain what that is, the certified education stipend.
we, in our contract years ago, was negotiated in all of our certified staff get a stipend that they can apply toward their continuing education. So essentially write them a
I
check
see.
every fall.
And that could, a potential savings of $45,000 to
A lot of
$108,000.
districts have pools of money and then they apply it to the pool. We don't do that. Every teacher gets a check.
So I read that just in the name of transparency, in the name of, hey, this is not anything secret. We're running out of money. The state commission is coming unless we pass new money within the next few election cycles. We will do our very best to continue to maximize limited resources. This is an excellent school district. by the ranking of third-party outside evaluators. What else is important to make public at this session?
Now it's like we talk, it's time to start working the plan, which is gonna, this is gonna lead to probably long board meetings from here on out. That's fine. I guess, and I know we might not be done yet, but the other thing I had on the agenda was to talk to you about our meeting with the Erie County Health Department and our strategy of with dealing with COVID in the school year. One thing that would immediately answer the question that I'm banking highly on, and you're all aware that we put out in social media, we're returning to school 5 days a week. Masks are optional. From the educator point of view, I'm hoping that just the idea that our kids are going back to school in the most normal way will be a big step to building back some goodwill in the community, because kids are going to school every day. They're interacting with their peers. They're getting to know their teachers better. The high school and middle school kids are able to attend events now and see their friends play sports or play in the band or plays. I think that'll help us in a direction, because then as we're back 5 days a week, our staff and our teachers can do what they do best, and that's interact and educate kids and get good test scores and all that stuff. Go on and on. There's, you take for granted a little bit when you lived, and now that at least me, as you've lived through this COVID shutdown, and I wasn't even in a school building during the shutdown, but you take for granted all those things that we just thought as the normal happy stuff at the start of the school year. We were always, when I was here, there was nothing better than a Huron fall. We're ready to get ready for testing. Our kids are in college classes, some of them, and we have 80+% participation in band, cheerleading, and athletics. Pretty good atmosphere to be around.
Sure is.
Plus, we won a lot. That helps. Don't underestimate that. So I'm personally banking on that as the beginning of our journey to restructure, rebuild, whatever, reclaim, rehab, whatever cliche we want to use, but as long as it's a positive one. But that will have positive effects. Before I go into the COVID thing, obviously we need to find out with the levy committee if we're done with this discussion for now.
With regard to the levy, anything additional?
I'd like to make a closing comment, and it builds on what something Will had said. I view that we're in a situation now, we've got, I'm going to build up the house analogy you started, John, so it's your fault. Okay. We've got a solid house, right? This district is solid, a little bit worn, a little bit old. We need to do some work on it. And I see right now, we have some beginnings of, the flames are starting to lick at the foundation and stuff, and where the fire department showed up. There's some things that we got to do. Step one is we've got to take care of the fire. The second part is, and gets back to this, that the district, we need to we get through this, get at least a short-term financial, when I say short-term, 4 to 5 years taken care of, then we've got to address the other big thing, and that is the facilities and ongoing operating levies. We've got 2 emergency levies out there right now that are on 10-year cycles, which is nice. Potentially a third one when the levy gets passed. At some point in time, we got to rationalize all 3 of those levies and think about a building project. And that could be all very successfully tied together, but it takes a lot of work. We can't do it right now while the building's starting to catch on fire, but as soon as we get the fire out, that's something I think the next board will have to tackle. This obviously is not going to happen this year, but I'm just planting a seed that's something to think about. We can do some things short term here. McCormick is a good first step. But this building and the 2 elementaries still need some more than some TLC. They need some upgrades. So
our newest building was constructed in 1970.
Yeah, so the point is that the operating issue is not gonna go away. And we got these 3 emergency levies that at some point in time, we're gonna have to figure substitute levies or do something else. Kind of ease the cycle, where it's a 5-year cycle or some other increment. I'm talking to a school district there, they've got like a mill or 2 mills on every year.
Mhm.
They're incrementing it. Well, we can't do that right now because a mill or 2 doesn't solve the issue, but maybe that's the right solution 5 years down the road. And so I just want to set that up, that let's get through the crisis and solve this and then we can go on to do more fun things.
I guess to cap that off, we know it doesn't appear at all that we'll be able to execute the game plan that Will shared with us and all those things we need to do. We don't have the people. I think at bare minimum, we have to look at, obviously we need to establish some kind of bare bones levy committee so that we can, I think if we are, and I'm hearing from the board, we are keeping the levy on, we at least need to make signage, and I would be more than happy to hold, public forums to invite people to McCormick to talk about this kind of stuff so that if nothing else, the public knows what we need, why we need it, we're on the ballot, and to take away any perception that anyone would have that we're trying to sneak it on. I hope it passes, it might not, but if it fails, I want to eliminate that point of you guys tried to sneak it on. I want to be upfront about it, even if we don't have much money to campaign with signs and with, and like I said, I'm more than willing to put myself out there to the public to answer those questions as best I can. But if nothing else, we'll know that everyone was well aware that the levy was on and take that anxiety away from our voters.
I just, John, this is always confusing to me. How much involvement can we have as a board? What can we do,
The thing that
the
we
guideline wise and everything?
Yeah, and we'll double check with OSBA. The big thing is if we do a forum night, you can't be in a position where 3 of you are attending together. I outside of obviously, like Will had pointed out, Donna, when the campaign passed, when I was here as a building administrator, I had nothing to do. I will take no credit for that levy whatsoever, other than I hope that by doing my job, just like Tim and Denny and all the other administrators are going to do every day, just by doing their job and they do it well, that's their contribution. That's all we're asking for them of the levy. But I think outside, and Will and I had talked about this a little bit. If you have like board members that are the chair and the treasurer, I don't know what the perception of that is. I have a couple people, Will and I did get a couple that I think would do our treasurer part. So at least we have somebody to watch the money as required by law. But I think it's good that, I'm trying to think, because it was before you guys were on the board. I think when we passed in 2005, I'm not sure that board was real involved.
They weren't.
I don't think they were. A
Well,
lot
there
of
was
them
that
were.
committee that started that Wednesday.
Here.
committee
Yeah,
that-
and that was all out of the
that was
booster group.
grassroots.
That was a community thing. So the board and the administration really wasn't that involved.
But I think there's 2 questions there. The right thing, the best way to do it
Yeah.
is just that the board, you have this gung-ho citizens committee as a board. You don't have to be involved. There's no legal thing that you can't be involved. It's not legal. The line is using school resources, right? Some of the allegations were somewhat misinterpreted. You can meet on school ground as long as the opposition can meet on school ground. It's just, it's the same, those things, but you can be involved. The superintendent treasurer have a special role because we're disseminators of information. In our roles, that's perfectly legal for us on school time. Go present at Rotary, or go present here because we are disseminating information. Right. That's where the kind of the boundaries are. I can send email. I can respond to emails all day on my school email about the levy because they're asking me for information. I'm not campaigning. That's kind of where the line is. It's what is school resources. And now this community, for whatever reason, some people have taken it to an extreme. I'm being critical because things that were done in the spring is done all, you know, every done is worse. I'm not saying it justifies it. I'm just saying, you know, our administrative public was too active in the campaign. And that's just a sad state of the committee. We don't want that for obvious reasons, not because of legal reasons, just because it really needs to be citizens driven, and that's the most effective way to do it. Right. So it's not just about right and wrong, it's what is effective. So get back to the board, as board members, you can be as much or little involved as you want to be legally. Now, the question is that effective? That's really the question. And obviously disseminating information, that's our, you know, what's what we need to do.
So the book that you have that John gave you about the levy, I have told all of you numerous times, I did virtually attend a levy, how to pass a levy workshop given by OSBA. So they recommend that the board is not involved in committees, that you have a board member who attends committee meetings and then disseminates that information to the rest of the board. And then I guess my question is, I know there was some question as to what was going to happen with the rest of the former levy committee's money. Has that been figured out?
Well, that technically is that committee's money. As a PAC, they can do whatever legally, and I don't know if the requirements they do it. I think we've negotiated, John, if I'm correct, they're going to give some of it to the new committee.
What, is there a dollar amount that some of it is, or?
I talked with Mr. Ward. I have not talked with the former chair. Thought it was half of what they had, somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe $2,000 we would get.
That's what I remember.
I would like to see all of it, but it's not our call.
I know there was some question
Right.
as
So-
what was gonna happen with that balance and
Right.
where it was gonna go, and
Yeah, they could, you know, you see politicians do it all the time. They got money in their campaigns. They're putting in other campaigns. So in this case, it's the Citizens for Huron, whatever the name of the committee is, it's their money.
We are back to, you know, like I said, we don't have a committee yet.
Right.
We need to just, even if it's one or two people, put their name to the pack with the treasurer, and they don't do anything else other than get some signs ordered, you know, so it's something.
And Jody's point's exactly right. Will's made the point. The levy campaigns I was on, I was successful as a citizen. I never saw a board member.
I have a question. I think maybe Jody could answer this based on that seminar. possibly.
right.
So based on something you said, so if which we need forums, and we talked about other things, like even going into smaller sessions, people's homes, like Will's house, you said a little session, there'd be 20 people show up and we could talk there. But so if we had the big forum, wouldn't it be nice for us to be there just in some support? Are we allowed to do that legally? If we had to, and I mean, did you hear anything in your seminar about that? Could all
No.
5 board members show up to this forum without breaking, like sunshine
It's not the
laws?
sunshine rules. You can be anywhere you want together. You can go to a private party. Just don't discuss school business. So if you go to a forum, you're not discussing business with each other. If you're watching the forum, you could be there. It raises some flags with people. You can go to sporting events. Don't discuss school business among yourselves. You ask how the weather is and.
I know those things got challenged all the time. I remember one in Sandusky about 10 years ago, there was 2 board members meeting for breakfast every Saturday. And a 3rd board member stopped by one time and they got in big trouble. Someone called them out and it's like, they swear they're not talking about school board, but it's a perception.
It's a perception issue. So from a sunshine standpoint, it doesn't say you can't do it. It's just, again, if you came to a forum, all 5 of you probably should come to hear the questions. Don't
Right.
sit together.
Yeah.
Right?
well, and I
Or
think,
do you open it up as a public meeting, call it a meeting?
right, but I
well-
also think it would be very beneficial if there is going to be a public forum where people can come from the community to have a board member be able to be part of that forum, because there may be some questions that we may have the answers to that someone else may not. And it might be beneficial to have a board member represent the board and be part of that forum.
Certainly, certainly.
That's a good, that's all, that's a great
Like a
option.
panel up there and one of them, at least one of them would be the board member.
Right. In your community, particularly if you do the neighborhood events, you should be at your neighborhood event in front and center. That's you're elected to do. And it's just that you get into these, Scott, it's perception versus, and it's the way this community, the negativity is right now. You're right. Probably about 5 of you showed up somewhere, or you're at Berardi's having breakfast and hanging out. A couple of you, someone's gonna think there's nefarious things going on. It's not fair, but that's. You gotta be aware of that.
Yeah, nefarious, we're trying to pass a levy. That's what we're doing.
And again, John and I have, we off of school time, right? We can campaign all day, right? Any of us can. During school time, we can still participate as long as we're passing in, we are passing information. And that could be someone asking a question.
Yeah, which you would do with any community member, pro or con, the school levy,
Right.
which is why that's natural in the course of your duty as treasurer.
Part of our job.
Yeah. Anyone else go to the order on the levy?
There was some question earlier about the action that we already took as far as cuts. And we had discussion about that. Is that all we're doing? We had discussion about that. Is that where everybody's comfortable with leaving it like that?
Well, we are we will be presented in November with a plan to close McCormick School. So that's one action that the superintendent with the high school principal chiming in a little bit will execute. Other than that, no, there hasn't been any action or any proposed. Other than these cuts are on the table, will be executed by a state commission. And that is, I just read that publicly just so folks know this will happen if we don't eventually pass a levy. That's the fact.
Pat, are you asking about the cuts that we talked about earlier regarding busing and pay to play? Or are you regarding?
Okay.
No,
Oh,
more so,
sorry.
Jody got me.
Yeah.
Just like I know there was some good
Yeah.
discussion and they just kind of tabled off and.
Right.
Oh, is that where we're at? I mean. No.
Well, I think it would take a motion to be put on the floor to see if there was any teeth in a motion to reverse any of those decisions. Am I correct?
Sure, and I would ask our treasurer to help us here with so we don't have anything like that on the agenda. I think we said we weren't taking action, but would we be in Holland? And again, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's.
We do have another.
We have a
board
meeting in a week and a
in a
half.
week and a half.
Yeah, so we have a regular board meeting coming up.
Mhm.
Fine.
I don't anticipate, the wording, Scott, is we don't anticipate any action at the time that was put out. That doesn't mean we can't take action. Now, someone may say, you said you weren't going to. No, we said we didn't. We put the agenda together. We didn't expect it. Remember that legally, by Ohio Revised Code, you have to have a meeting agenda. Doesn't mean you can't change it.
Yeah.
And as the meeting goes on, you can change it at the last minute. You can change it as going on. So you have to have an agenda. That's the only requirement.
Just made the comment to make sure that everybody was satisfied with where it ended up. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, this was just to discuss where we are, where we may need to go down the road, and I think that we've hashed that out pretty well. That sets us up for the board meeting then to, start seriously talking about some of those items.
Correct me if I'm wrong, John, we do plan to have Denise do an update on the transportation thing.
So, yeah, before we adjourn, I'll talk about this in order, but just to throw it out there, I'm going to propose that the 17th board meeting be at the bus garage at 8 a.m. for the same reason that we did the meeting here. I think that I'd like to open it up to our community. I think people would be interested to see the things that we do with our non-certified staff out at the bus garage and maintenance type things to that help our district. Fiscally, it helps our kids. I got the idea. I stopped out one morning. Steve Zeck was had the bus tire covered, and he was kind of working on the bottom of the body of the bus, and I'm looking at this bus and it's shiny and nice bus inside. He tells me it's 20 years old. I'd have never guessed that in 20 guesses that that bus was 20 years old. And, you know, that's one of the, you know, we talk about positives. You know, to me, that's a hugely, you know, another great part of the school district. Not only are our test scores great in our athletics and our extras, but you go out to that bus garage and you see the facility and the care that they give not only the buses, but our equipment, the attitude of the people out there, how they take care of things. So I think that's just as important for the board and the community to see. So we would like to do that 8 a.m. meeting on the 17th at the bus ground.
8 a.m.
It's 8 a.m. scheduled previously, you know, and
Oh, that, for August. Yeah.
17th. So we would like to, we can set up at the bus garage and take a tour and look at our fleet. And
I think it's an excellent idea.
then there's no more levy questions. I would like to just close out by discussing the meeting that was on July 29th with all Erie County superintendents and the health department. And this was it was initiated by Sandusky City, and I think they have a degree of trepidation about coming back, but overall, the meeting was optimistic. And I know with COVID and the variant, you know, on the news, things change every day. I get that. Each aid, in summary, the health commissioner of the county is optimistic at the time of our discussion on the 29th. So we are going to have a good school year. The common theme was as we enter and reopen was all the districts, Sandusky didn't commit, Vermillion didn't commit, but all the districts in the county other than those two are going back 5 days, mask optional. And the word that kept coming up that we have to deal with this is that common sense kind of thing. And Pete correctly had just a point that resonated. We know a lot more now, even with the variant out there, than we did at the beginning of this in a year ago. Doesn't mean we still have things to learn, but we know more. So what I did is we decided, and I had emailed you to put out, we wanted to get something out on social media because people were wondering what's going on. 5 days, mask optional, we're staying the course. And then I emailed you a draft document that I'd like to get out today, no later than Monday, with a little bit more detail. And if I could just read through it real quick. I set it up as a frequently asked, excuse me, questions document. And, you know, the first one is how did the Huron City school officials arrive at this decision? And the answer was simply put, as educators, you know, we realize that our students benefit from being in school 5 days a week. We also clearly understand that student safety is of the utmost importance. Decisions such as this are never easy, but we feel we have listened to our community, consulted with our districts, most importantly, received guidance from the Erie County Health Department. Second question, do students who ride the bus have to wear masks? Now, this is one of these things where it's a little tricky. And the answer is yes. The CD, from what I understand, the CDC, excuse me, still mandates, at least until September 11th or 13th, the mask must be worn while being on public transportation. This also applies to sports teams banning any group of students or staff using busing for extracurriculars. So our understanding, the original draft of this was we highly recommend masks on the bus. But the understanding now is that it's a CDC mandate that is going to expire in September. Next question was, is there an option for students who are uncomfortable returning to in-person classes? Yes, we will continue to offer the Huron Virtual Academy for grades 9-12, students who may not be comfortable attending in-person classes. What COVID-related safeguards will still be in place? When you enter any school building, you will still see clear barriers in place at drinking fountains that are water filling stations and drinking fountains that are water filling stations only. We will continue to use common sense social distancing when practical. All of our cleaning protocols from last year will still be in place to help ensure the safest possible environment for our students and staff. Do the Huron City Schools require students and staff to be vaccinated for COVID? We do not require vaccinations for COVID, nor will we ask if any students or staff member is vaccinated. What if there's a positive case in my child's classroom? Tough. We would work with the Erie County Health Department, and I put in within the boundaries of Ohio Revised Code. Because as we learned yesterday at our legal update in House Bill 110, and this has not, at least I didn't see it until yesterday. There is what happened in House Bill 110, aside from the budget, is the legislature has greatly emasculated the government and health department's ability to issue mandates, simply put. And in that is, and I copied the language on my phone, and I don't have my glasses, but part of Senate Bill 22, now the House Bill 110 emasculated a lot of things, but they're going on with other stuff. This came into effect in June, and it forbids health departments from issuing quarantine or isolation orders to anyone who has not been medically diagnosed with a communicable disease. This prohibits any kind of blanket stay-at-home order over a state or specific region. So what we're interpreting this as, and this can be really tricky, unless a student, say if has been positively diagnosed with COVID, and the health department really doesn't have any ability to quarantine or isolate. So if somebody says
Tracing thing, there's no.
they're not doing that anymore either, there's a state company. So if somebody calls Tim and says, I'm keeping Scott home because he's not feeling good today, Tim says, well, does he have COVID symptoms? Yes and no, he's fatigued and achy and painy, but hasn't lost his taste and smell. Well, there's no diagnosis there. Probably HIPAA forbids us from asking or requiring them to go to a doctor. So now, we're in a pretty tricky situation. We don't know if this particular student is positive. Now, if the parent calls and, we had one, for example, a parent did call, a cross-country middle school parent. Their son or daughter had been diagnosed with COVID. The practices had been outside. The beautiful part about cross-country is it's naturally socially distanced. So it was outside, socially distanced. The health department was fine with what we did. We just informed the parents that we had a positive COVID, and you have every right to keep your athlete back from condition. Never heard a word after that from anyone. So the lack of mandates combined with the government mandates about not mandating mandates is making things confused. But we know this. We're going to go through this every day. We're all going to talk. That's the best thing to do. So, but to answer that question, we would work with the department, and we would in here we also respectably ask that you keep your child home if they're not feeling well or exhibiting COVID symptoms. Please try to keep them. Can students, parents, guardians, community members attend after-school events without capacity restriction? The answer to that is yes. After-school activities will be back to normal. We want to join our community in taking a common sense approach, such as ask our fans not to attend if they are sick, socially distance if practical, wear a mask if that makes you feel more comfortable at our event. Our custodial staff will continue with thorough cleaning protocols. Could any of these procedures change during the school year? And the answer is yes. Procedures could change. As we have all experienced throughout this pandemic, events can dictate rapid change. Should government mandates be put in place for any reason, we would be obliged to follow them. We want to be very clear about that. Right now, everything's a recommendation, and we know that maybe some mandates can't be put into place because of law. But if a lawful mandate is put in place, we don't have a choice. And I've had that conversation with a couple parents about masks on the bus and things. Look, if it's a lawful mandate, we have to. And then there's what if I have further questions? So my email, Brian's email, Mark's email, Chad's email, and Tim's email is all on. So that will be sent out, and this is just like everything else. You know, this is a work in progress, and this is something that we will, monitor with extreme care day in and day out. I am the health department. They're really taking more of an assistive role. One thing that they talked about that I know they didn't hear in county last year that Pete Shea talked about is they're going to look at cases by zip code. So they have the ability a little bit more to focus in, and who knows, if we have a high rate of cases, we could even get as focused as per building. I don't know, but they are taking, it seems like, more of an assistive, supportive role. What do you need? Than a role of mandating. Sure, they're going to give us, recommendations, but, they're also right now all about kids being in 5 days. Now, I can only speak for our county. I've heard that the hospital has opened the COVID unit again. I heard that from somebody yesterday. We also talked at the meeting a week ago that there are some cases among children, but at the time of the meeting, none of those children were hospitalized or particularly real sick. There is a school of thought that the vaccine itself will be formally approved by the FDA in the fall, early fall, which could lead to other adults choosing, if they're comfortable with that, to get vaccinated. And there is some talk about the possibility of a 12 and under vaccine. I don't know if it would be formally approved or emergency approved by the winter of 2022. In other words, after the first of the year. Again, that's a personal choice. We don't mandate it. But if we look at, if a parent calls in and we do have a positive COVID case, if we have people vaccinated in that room, then they will not be quarantined. We're not going to ask them. We're just going to say, if you're vaccinated, and we know that under 12 are not, but a high school case, you're vaccinated, there's no quarantine. That's the honor system.
Anyone on the COVID issue?
It's an important change from a school insurance standpoint. Because last year, our insurance advisor said, follow the mandates. If you don't, and something happens, we may or may not be able to protect you or, provide legal coverage. But with no mandates, then it becomes a lot more gray. And negligence is always, that always hangs there
Of course.
regardless.
Mhm.
You can't be
Every time
negligent.
you open your school doors.
You just can't be negligent. But so in some ways, the relaxed makes things more confusing, but you don't have quite the pressure from the insurance companies too. I mean, I know we don't want to operate in a scared mode, but it made that perfectly clear. But that was new for them too, right?
And it was brought up, in this discussion that, as any district, you could very well face a lawsuit if a child catches COVID in your school building. It's going to happen.
Appreciate you attending that meeting and reporting to the board, Mr. Ruff. If nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Could I ask one more question?
Oh, indeed.
This goes back to the pay to participate. Just curious, since fall sports have started, practices have started, has there been any lesser participation with the anticipation of students having that fee tacked on to their school fees? Have you had any coaches say, I don't have as many kids coming out, or this has impacted my sport? Just interested.
I've not heard anything personally. I don't know.
I've talked to, not specifically about to that with coaches, but I've seen all coaches and band.
Because those fees won't actually be realized until a little later. They come out when school fees come out.
On the child's school fee,
Right.
That comes out after the first 9 weeks.
like midway through it.
Right.
And has there been any communication from the Booster Club that they are willing or able to tackle some of those fees if someone's unable to pay those? Are there scholarships available?
The last meeting I was at, and to my knowledge, they haven't told me this is changing. they were unwilling to tackle those fees because they disagree with the policy. So in other words, by tackling those fees and paying it, then they feel like they are endorsing a policy that they don't like. So, yes, and to my knowledge, that mindset has not changed. That said, the Booster Club would direct anyone who can't pay, I'm sure that to Mr. Camella. And there are people that have reached out to me privately that have said, hey, look, we find out that there's a kid that can't pay, let me know, I'll write a check. And that would go not through the boosters, but just the check would go to the athletic department here in
Sure.
City Schools.
Good question. Anything else?
I'm gonna throw it out there. I would like to put a motion on the floor to reverse the board's decision to eliminate high school busing and athlete pay to play.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mast. Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Mr. Treasurer?
Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Mass,
Yes.
Mr. Slocum,
Yes.
Mr. Jones. Yes. Mr. Ward.
Yes. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, what's killing me?
Fairly comfortable.
Oh, jeez.
That's that works. I'll remind Steve.
This close to just standing up in my waist.
Oh, you can do that with
I
the hair.
know.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks, Doc. See you.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you.
Council, I'm looking about their fundraiser this summer. They raised $500 to help out for a pay like kids too.
Oh, good. I didn't know that.
Thing, just there are resources.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
That's
I was
wonderful.
all students glad they set it up on their own. and,
Great.
Very cool.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Danny.
We have great kids.
Where's that fine art?
Same to you, Scott. Thank you very much.
Building as a whole lockdown. I think they have a lockdown situation, whatever that helps.
Yeah, that's what you. I'm really to see out. And I didn't- I'm just saying, I expected. Like pixel or what you call it. I'm not. I think there's some really great improvements that haven't cost a whole lot. Are gonna make a good difference. It's vital.
Yeah, you too.
Keep plugging along.
That's what we do. Goodbye, Mrs. Matt.
See ya.
Thanks for coming. See you later.
We just gotta find somebody where we can at least have something to intake money and make.
I'm planning on it. Hopefully. Hopefully. It won't get ugly for you.
So you would jump out this weekend?
I got my. I got my. Yeah, it's just like, I'm so busy, I just need to benefit here stuff.
Talk around and have him come over and all three of us. Look at the front and see like what he thinks, you know, would be appropriate and beautiful and all that good stuff. And then we can go.
We don't recycle.
No, we don't. Yeah, we do, but I mean, just put this in the trash over there.
Yeah.